Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. This is Jamie Leonard again with TCG Unlimited. Today we bring you another quick EDH game. Well, I guess I shouldn't say quick, but anyway, moving on. Today we have my 5-color EDH deck, Super Friends as we call it. If you don't know the deck, it's actually 5-color Plainswalkers against another deck I built, which my friend wanted to try out. It is my colorless Eldrazi deck. Thing to note is the deck itself is not done. However, it is still pretty good in my opinion. In fact, it really comes pretty close. Let's get into the game. Nothing too exciting for the first couple of turns, just a few land drops. As you know, Eldrazi are typically pretty slow, even with the new stuff released. It's still not a really fast deck. So basically, the first few turns we're just going to be drawing some cards, playing some lands, setting up for the later turns. As you see, I start off the game by playing 2 of the scry lands, setting up more land drops. That's usually the deck's initial purpose, is just set up a bunch of land drops. While he meanwhile immediately gets a artifact out, which basically crawl space, which basically won't allow me to attack him with more than one creature, which is fine. My deck doesn't require me to attack. Basically, at that point, he's just trying to get it out of his hand. So again, I play a dual land, letting it come and play tapped. I don't need the mana this turn. Definitely would have preferred another scry land, but you know, you take what you can get. At this point, I try to decide if there's anything else I'd rather do. I do not, but however, I did have to discard. So I choose to discard a card that I knew I'd be able to just use flashback. I'd just read to basically play it every turn for its ability, which basically allows you to play it from the graveyard any number of times as long as you can discard a land, as well as pay its mana cost. He chooses to play Plague Mirror for his next turn, get some early bodies on board. Mainly, it just runs a lot of the mirrors just to make it some, you know, cheap, easy, quick mana. So here I'm going to untap, play another double Overgrown Tomb, letting it come into play tapped. I don't really need the mana this turn. The thing to remember about my Planeswalker deck is it really doesn't do a whole lot in the early game unless it's just an absurd amount of card advantage that I'm getting. As you see, I pay the 3 for the Oath of Jace, which is a very powerful card in this deck. I mean, just obscenely powerful in my opinion. For 3 mana, for 2 and a blue, it basically comes in play, lets you draw 3 cards, then discard 2 cards. If that weren't enough, I mean, that's just an insane amount of advantage for this deck overall. But if that weren't enough, it actually, the card just gets so much worse during the later stages of the game. At the beginning of your upkeep, you basically get to scry X cards, where X is the number of planeswalkers you control. So in my deck, I mean, that's just an absurd amount of card advantage, because that can easily be basically scrying 5 cards a turn. But as you see, he plays the Temple of the False God, playing the new 3-cost artifact that lets him tap for a waste or sack 2, I think, raw card. Again, just more ramping, trying to get as much mana in play as possible. So here he decides he was wanting to play another card, but he chooses against it. Instead, I think he's just going to go for the... At this point, he was trying to decide if he just wanted to go for the 1 quick hit, but he decides not to, just chooses to leave it up. Which, in my opinion, if you weren't going to cast anything, there was no point in not dealing that damage. But Eldrazi can pretty much just kill you regardless of what your life total is. So it's really, that 1 damage is irrelevant. Here I play an Ancient Tomb, deal myself 2 damage to tap for 2 mana, as well as, well, basically tapping out actually. To play Mana Reflection. Seeing all the early mana he gets, the 2 from the Ivugan, the False God, and his 2 artifacts, he's already up a lot of mana. So I knew by this point I needed to ramp as much as possible. Another thing to note about my deck is it actually does run a large amount of enchantments, which I'm not particularly happy about. But in our group, in our play groups, it's not that much of an issue for us. Most people don't run a lot of enchantment removal, even though they know my deck is around. Again, I don't really like relying on a lot of enchantments to get the job done, but, you know, if that's the only thing you've got, you just go with it. Alright. So this time he does, in fact, choose to hit me for the 1 infect. And at that point, I'm just trying to make sure he's not done. He chooses to play another Eldrazi. Again, just getting bodies on board. I mean, at this point, I know I'm in trouble. Because at this point, I think by this point, if he gets another land, he pretty much just drops the Ulamog that I run for the general. And at that point, he hits the Oath, and he hits the Mana Reflection, and I'm pretty much going to be out of the game. So at this point, I'm basically going to be just trying anything and everything just to get just try to get something going as quickly as possible. So at this point, I choose to tap for 4. I'm going to have 1 floating. At the time, I don't remember what it was I chose to actually leave floating. Probably a blue. Cast a Fabricate, go get an artifact. At this point, I think I went and got the Chromatic Lantern just to let me color fix for my Plainswalkers a little bit better. Just giving me more options as far as what I can do when it comes to the later turns. Again, as I said, as you can see, I don't have any white sources, which definitely hurts. So at this point, I'm just trying to decide on what artifact I want. The deck runs a lot of really good artifacts, so it's just a matter of trying to find the right one to play. But in this case, again, I needed to ramp, I needed to color fix. It really wasn't an easy decision. I'm trying to check to see how much mana I have. I think at one point I even forgot that I had the 1 blue floating. But I do think I remember it at the end. So I do actually, oh no, so I do choose to get the Gilded Lotus. So basically, I think at this point what I'm going to do is I end up tapping the Ancient Tomb for 4 this time, as well as the 1 floating to get to get the artifact out. It gives me 3 mana of any color, which is plenty for the deck. The only real issue my deck has is its color fixing. A lot of the cards cost double of one color or the other, and it makes it that much harder. So as I said, at this point I did forget. Well, actually, at this point I do remember. So tap for 4, use the 1 floating, deal myself 2 to bring out the Gilded Lotus. Tapping for 3. Actually, no, tapping for 6. I choose 6 white. And then I think for the 1 additional, Hour of Reckoning, destroy all non-token creatures. At this point, with the board wipe, I was able to look at my hand and basically decide that at this point the game was just going to go downhill from there. I asked him how much mana he has. I realized he doesn't have the mana to cast Ulamog the next turn, no matter what he does. So at this point, I know I have at least 1 more turn before Ulamog goes off. So I'm basically at this point, I'm going to hope that it's enough to draw into something that's going to get something going. He does not get the land he needs. So again, at this point, I didn't know for sure, but I was pretty sure I had him at the point where I was basically gonna start feeling a lot safer. Not a lot of huge cards you could choose from at this point. Basically losing, access to one of his mana sources. He was going to be, I think, one or two mana short. And as you can see, it drops another artifact to make some more mana. He plays one of the artifacts that lets you basically choose 1 card from your graveyard, put it on the bottom of your deck, It also taps for a mana, so again, it's just another mana rock for the deck, and plus it, you know, gets a couple threats back. But as I said, I mean, at this point, if he'd managed to play like a Soul Ring or something, I might have been a little scared. That would have given him the 2, but I wasn't too concerned about that. He didn't make the play right away. So I wasn't too concerned about him having just anything just, you know, just amazing in hand. As you can see, he drops the Loxiderm Warhammer, which would give one of his creatures lifelink. That is definitely a problem. You know, definitely at no time do you ever want to see an Ulamog with lifelink. Chooses to drop the Ruin Servitor. Ruin Servitor has the ability when it dies, everybody draws a card. So this deck, the Eldrazi deck, unfortunately does not have a lot of draw effects. So basically it's just I tried to stuff as many quality cards in there as possible, cheap cards as well. Ruin Servitor lets everybody draw. That's not necessarily the best thing in the world, but at least it does do its job. It does provide a cheap blocker just in case, you know, some aggro decks try to get out of hand early. But like again, I basically at this point I look at my hand and I'm pretty sure I've got this game in the bag. It's just a matter of getting there. I choose to tap for 6. I really at that point didn't care what color for the Mycosynth Lattice. Mycosynth Lattice basically turns everything into an artifact in addition to its other types, as well as mana fixing for the entire deck. Everything is colorless. All of your lands tap for any color. And basically, anytime I can mana fix, it just really allows the deck to just go sideways. So at this point, I choose to basically, for nothing at all, drop an easy Venser, as well as, I believe, yeah, Rouse Zarek. Definitely two major planeswalkers you don't want coming out that early in the game. I choose to tap for 4, deal myself another 2. Especially now that I can have that basically create colored mana. Have that with the 1 extra for the 5 for Liliana. Basically, at this point, I believe that I'm going to use Liliana for her minus search effect. Basically, and Rouse Zarek's just going to be there to, you know, just do a little tinkering. Now, I will say, please keep in mind that this game was pretty late at night. We weren't really, we'd been playing all day. We'd actually been meaning to do other videos, but we had more than one person wanting to play. And unfortunately, we don't have a rig for multiple people where you can really only set up for 2 people at a time. So we kind of, spent the day just playing with everybody else, and that really wore us down. So I will say, there are a few misplays here and there. Nothing too serious, nothing that would have actually changed anything. I'll point them out as we get there. So basically, I go use my Liliana to search for a card. Choose to put it all in, and it goes to the top of the deck, and then I'm basically going to use Rouse Zarek basically to tap something and then untap something. Again, I just keep looking at it, just keep checking it, make sure that's what I want to do. I was actually kind of, when I initially played it, I was thinking maybe he did something to draw so I could go ahead and get that card in hand. But unfortunately it didn't. So I choose to actually no. I'm sorry. No, instead I did choose to use Rouse Zarek to shoot the Ruin Servitor, which basically allows me to draw that card I just tutored for. And then I'm basically deciding what I want to do with Venser. I know Venser has several different uses. At this point, I'm just trying to decide how I want Venser to play. But at this point, I just go ahead and pass a turn. I know that there's, pretty much I know that there's no way he can. Again, he'll be able to play Ulamog. So again, I know I have at least one more turn. Basically, this time he's just trying to figure out how to get back in the game. He does have a lot of mana to work with, and in that deck, that's still a very dangerous card. If he'd really been paying attention, as you can see, he's got the Oblivion Sower in hand. If he'd actually thought ahead and went ahead and played the Oblivion Sower, I would have actually been in a lot of trouble. Oh, he actually does. I do remember now. He actually does, so he actually manages to get rid of the card I tutored for. Oh, wait. Yeah, so and the Ruin Servitor would have let me draw on it. So yeah, I'd already had the card I wanted. I was basically, you know, here's my 2 lands. Enjoy them. They're not going to do you much good at this point. You know, if anything, you kind of handed me the game in the long run. I have 3 Plainswalkers. At the beginning of my turn, Oath of Jace basically is going to let me scry 3. Definitely going to help me set up my next big play. And basically, I'm going to be honest. I think if memory serves me correctly, this is actually like the last play of the game. Because at this point, there's just not a whole lot he can do. He's going to put the Loxodurm on the Oblivion Sower, just make him a little bit bigger, give him some lifelink. The only problem with that is, I mean, with my 5-color deck, I'm not really required to do any attacking at all. In fact, most of my games are just one off of the endless number of combos for the deck. So he's just basically spending the whole turn just dropping mana rocks, just trying to, you know, boot up his Eldrazi, trying to get some lifelink going. But at this point, that doesn't matter. At this point, he could have 1,000 life and it wouldn't matter. My deck's basically in the driver's seat. It's ready to roll. I mean, at this point, there's just absolutely nothing that his deck can do to me. So at this point, pretty much at this point, this is the only real turn that's really left in the game. At this point, it's just going to be a matter of when I choose to end the game. I'm basically looking at his board, realizing he does have the mana now to play the Ulamog, and that is definitely not what I need to happen. Because if he can play it, he can hit the Mana Reflection, he can hit the Gilded Lotus, and it's basically going to take me off of a lot of my mana, and that's definitely not what I need to happen right now. So basically at this point, all I'm really going to do is I'm basically going to I'm going to go ahead and play a Besiege You, even though I know it's about to get blown up. Which is fine. I mean, even if it stayed in my hand, it wouldn't have mattered. As you can see, I'm looking at another Plainswalker in my hand to try to decide if I want to play it. However, I know there's just no point. I know it's just going to die, even if I do. At this point, there's really just no further real point in continuing the game. Or really just trying to develop the board any further, but I do actually choose to go ahead and play the Ajani. It is the green-white Ajani, if I'm not mistaken. Even though it really isn't going to, it's not really going to help the board state at this point. I can't remember off the top of my head which one of the abilities I choose to use, but it was basically I'm just playing cards just for the sake of playing cards. Which in the end ends up being a big mistake. But I'm basically going to use it to reveal some cards. I choose the only thing I can, which is the Nicobolus, which is a really bad thing for me to be able to be put into my hand, especially with just how devastating Nicobolus can be in this 5-color deck. Exceptional card, a lot of versatility. And at this point, he basically admits he knows that the end is coming. There's really no avoiding it. So at this point, he's not sure what the blue dice was. I remind him that was the Infect. The red one is the mana I'm going to have floating from playing the Nicobolas. So now I'm going to have 5 Planeswalkers. I'm trying to decide how I want to play this turn, but it's actually really simple. I really kind of overthought it. So I just used Nicobolas, blow up his last creature. And basically at this point, I mean, being Eldrazi, you're only going to really be able to drop 1, maybe 2 big guys at a time. There's just not much you can do about it. I mean, basically at this point, I mean, I basically know that I'm going to be able to win. It was just really just a matter of time. But I do believe that I am actually, I do believe he does have one more turn. I could be wrong, but I do believe he actually does get one more turn. Rightfully, I think I could have actually ended the game if I had just, if I had not really done some of the things I'd done. But either way, I mean, the game goes in my favor either way. So again, using Liliana to search, put a card on top. This is basically where I'm going to go ahead and get my in the game card. I'm going to go ahead and use it. Use Ral Zarek to go ahead and, I believe, untap one of my lands. I mean, just because why not? Oh, no. I choose to go ahead and tap down the Coalition Relic, even though I know he'll just tap it in response. I mean, really, there was just no point. I just wanted Ral Zarek's counters up. I could have used it to untap something, or tap or untap something else. But I do untap the Gilded Lotus with the Ral Zarek. And use so I'm going to have 4 floating, because I did forget it actually taps for 6. To play the Price of Glory, which is a card I really love for the deck. A lot of people ask me why I changed the deck up from the previous build. I basically explained to them all simply because of this card. Price of Glory basically turns a blue deck into anything but a blue deck. Basically, I mean, when you really have to decide, you know, what's more important, this counterspell or losing 4 lands. Basically, Price of Glory, if you don't know what Price of Glory does, Price of Glory says, whenever you tap a land for mana and it's during another player's turn, your land is destroyed. Of course, this goes for everybody. So I did have to alternate my deck up a little bit. I did run a couple counterspells, just a couple core counterspells for the really important cards, but I knew if I was going to put Price of Glory in, I was going to go full counterspell hate and just not run any myself. I mean, it really, Price of Glory just basically, it dissuades you from doing anything at the end of my turn. You won't try to combo off on somebody else's turn. You really can't do anything at that point. However, you know, it does just say lands, so if you've got a lot of artifact mana or you have any way to turn your lands indestructible, you're fine. But at this time, he's basically... At this point, he basically, you know, is trying to just figure out how he's going to play his turn, asking what is how many counters Ral Zarek had, just trying to check to see which Planeswalkers were the most dangerous threat. I basically tell him at this point, your biggest 3 issues are Venser, Ral Zarek, and Nicobolas. However, even if he does play the Ulamog, I know at that point, I mean, he's going to have to hit 2 of the Planeswalkers. I mean, if you don't, I'm going to use Nicobolas, and I'm going to take Ulamog from you. I basically explain it to him. I can hit your 2 enchantments, and I'm like, yeah, you can do that, but then Nicobolas is going to turn around and take it, and then it's going to swing it back at you. So at this point, he basically knows that there's really not much he's going to be able to do about it. He knows he's going to have to basically use... basically tap out to play his Ulamog, which I do believe he's just going to have to go ahead and do it here at this point. And he does, realizing that Ulamog is really his only hope for winning this game, even though basically, again, as I've said, I basically look at my hand and I go, sure, you know, I'm not scared of an Ulamog at this point. I mean, you know, especially with how powerful this card is. I mean, who's not scared of an Ulamog resolving? I mean, this guy is just a total beast. For those that don't know what Ulamog does, when you cast him, I mean, it's not that the fact that he has to resolve. He just has to cast him. He exiles 2 permanents of your choice. And then when he declares his attack, he doesn't have to deal combat damage. He just has to declare his attack. And when he does, the defending player exiles the top 20 cards of their deck. I mean, that's just huge in and of itself. I mean, just, you know, even if it was 10 cards, that's a major blow to somebody's deck. But the fact that Ulamog does double that with a total of 20 is just an insane amount of just disadvantage you're going to be able to do anything about. So at this point, I'm basically just kind of looking at my lands, looking at all of my options, realizing that I have all the pieces I need. He's basically asking, you know, I'm basically at this point, I'm going, you know, what other things do you want to hit? And he's like, well, I'll just let me get the Nicol, let me get their Mana Reflection. I'm like, okay. So I was like, all right. So basically, what you're saying is you'd rather me scry 4, you'd rather me have Mana Fix. So you want to hit the Mana Reflection that at this point really doesn't even matter. So he uses the 3 remaining his remaining mana to go ahead and put the Loxodon on Ulamog. I think at this point we make the joke about, you know, how broken it would be if Loxodon gave haste as well as lifelink. You know, we basically agreed at that point that would just have won him the game. So now he's basically going to go ahead and scry. I believe he decides it's just not worth trying to keep. I mean, again, he really doesn't have enough. I mean, he's going to have a turn. He's actually going to have a couple more turns, but they're basically just going to be, you know, draw a card, say go. I mean, the fact that if he had hit the Venser, I really would have had to go to plan B. I would have had to definitely have gone with, you know, other options if he'd hit the Venser. You'll see why in just a minute. This is actually a pretty sneaky play I make. I really wasn't thinking about it when I actually saw it. But I go ahead and use the Oath of Jace to scry 4. Not really finding anything of any particular use, but I just go ahead and leave it on top. I knew what I was going to leave on top, which is basically the card I tutored for. I mean, at that point, I'm looking for future lands. Because basically, I'm about, or as we make the joke, I'm about to make the world go boom. So at this point, it's just a matter of I choose to tap for 3, 4, to play another card. Basically, okay, yeah, so Humility, which basically, sorry about that, I couldn't actually see it on my screen, and I couldn't remember what it was I played at that point. I actually played Humility, which takes away Ulamog's abilities. It takes away every part of his utility. So at this point, I just make the joke, I ask him if he wants to submit. There's really no point in any going any further. I mean, his big boss card is basically a 1/1. And unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of ways he can get rid of it. Ulamog himself is the only true answer to Humility in this deck. I go ahead and drop the Doubling Season, which is, honestly, it's a little too late. And I basically am going to realize that in a couple of turns. So I do actually believe I'm going to give him a couple of turns, even though he's basically got a useless 1/1 Ulamog that does have a... excuse me. Does have a Loxodon Warhammer, so he does still have lifelink. It's not as impressive anymore, but it's still a card. So again, I'm going to use the Liliana to go ahead and search. At this point, he reminds me, I don't have to show him, but I was like, at this point, it's kind of irrelevant. I'm just making sure you understand that, bad things are headed your way. I mean, basically, when you know your opponent's going to drop a Nicol and then an Ugin right behind it, it just goes to show just how powerful, just how deadly this deck can be. Basically, my entire deck is just, again, if you can't already tell, it's basically just playing multiple Planeswalkers, chaining their multiple different types of effects just to get different levels of advantage. Again, using the Ajani to basically sort through the deck. Going ahead and using the Ajani, looking at the top 4 cards, trying to see if there's anything I can grab. Unfortunately, there is not, but however, it is another 4 cards off the top of the deck. It is kind of a sad thing to see all those lands go to waste, because I definitely needed those lands. Basically, at this point, I'm just going to have Liliana just basically try to build up some counters, try to set up for future turns. I don't really have the mana now for the Ugin, which is fine. He'll come down next turn. Basically, he's right here. You can see he's kind of questioning how the Loxodon would trigger, and I'm explaining that it just takes Humility only takes away the creature's abilities, not anything added to it from other sources. So it'll actually, in all actuality, it's going to be a 4/1 lifelink. So he does have a way to get his cards back to base, or to a sizable body. The only thing though is at this point I have to be really careful not to kill the Ugin, because if I kill Ugin and he gets 2 more mana, he can easily just play the Ugin or play the Ulamog again. And I'm sorry, didn't mean to say Ugin. But basically, I know if I kill the Ulamog, he can play it again now that it's no longer indestructible. So I'm trying to avoid destroying the Ulamog. Don't want to give him any way to exile any more of my combo pieces. Basically, the trick for defeating my own deck is if you can bait out the Ulamog and then drop the Ulamog deck basically just kind of dies. There are a couple of cards that just exile target permanents, destroy target artifact, and that and the other. And because of Mycosynth Lattice turning things into artifacts, there is definitely a way for the deck to come back at this point. It's just not going to be easy. There's only a handful of cards that's going to let him do it. There's only a handful of things that's going to give him any real options at this point. So basically, at this point, it's just a matter of him trying to dig for that card. Unfortunately, he's not going to find it. Basically, at this point, I'm just asking him again, do you want to go ahead and call it a game? There's really no point in continuing. If you don't draw that answer, there's just really no point in continuing. Doubling Season is down. The Ugin happens on the next turn. He comes in with double counters. And at that point, Ugin's gonna just destroy you. He chooses to do the brave thing. He's gonna fight it out as much as possible. He chooses to drop one of the new Colossus guys that tap for a waste. Really good card. I love it for the deck. However, it's just a little too late. If he'd come a little early in the game, it might have made a difference. At this point, he chooses to play It That Betrays. However, at this point, thanks to Humility, he basically plays 12 mana for a 1/1 with no effects. And I believe I actually make that joke on just the fact that it's kind of funny that he chooses, he plays 12 mana to play a 1/1 with no effect. But at this point, he has to try to get something in play so that when he does destroy the Humility, he's got answers. He chooses to swing in with the Ulamog. I'm basically going to take it. He's going to attack my Ajani. Which, again, if he had chosen to attack Venzer, he might have been able to put me in a hard spot. But instead, he chooses to attack the Ajani, knowing that I can easily bounce the Ajani to my hand, play him again with Doubling Season, and gain 100 life, and basically put the game out of reach forever. So he's trying to kill the Ajani as fast as possible. Unfortunately, it's just not enough at this point. However, the one downside to that kind of play is the sheer fact that at this point, again, I'm going to untap. I'm going to scry 4. I think at this point I do find the card I've been looking for. If not, it's definitely coming within the next couple of turns. I choose to leave everything there. I mean, at this point, I could have put the more useless cards on the bottom, but at this point, there's just no point. Again, the Ugin is in hand. Ugin's just gonna kind of let me run away with this game. I saw a couple cards I really wanted to put in play, so now it's just a matter of dropping the amount of mana for Ugin. I know for a fact I have more than enough. That's not even a question. So I'm just going to tap the Gilded Lotus, the remaining 4 that I need. For the Ugin, he's going to come in with double counters. Basically remind myself, I don't get to play Ugin very much, so I'm basically reminding myself of how Ugin actually does, the order he does it in. Not that that really matters. But basically go ahead and use Ugin's ultimate just to basically gain 7 life, draw 7 cards, and then finally put 7 cards or 7 permanents from your hand into play. And I think it was actually at this point that I see the card I want. I see the blow the world up card, and I'm just going to hold on to it for one more turn. And then at this point, I'm just dropping random cards in my hand just for no apparent reason. As you see, the Academy Rector comes out. I really wish I'd had some kind of a sack outlet for her. Unfortunately, I don't have it. As you can see, the Omniscience comes out, which basically sets up the end of the world plays. As you can see, here's one of the misplays. I'm just going through putting in play any relevant cards in my hand. And as you can see, I just played in a Johnny. I am going to notice it at this point, and I'm like, okay, well, it doesn't matter which Johnny I choose. Okay, so no, I haven't actually noticed it yet. I'm just basically dropping cards, just trying to decide how I want things to come in. And at this point, yes, I do realize that, 2 Johnnies don't mix. Choose to keep the original thanks to the new Plainswalker rule. At this point, I think at this point it's just a matter of when I want the game to end. At this point, he's asking me how many cards exactly I had that could deal with humility. I mean, I'm sitting there telling him he's got quite a few options. The problem is you've got to draw it, and he doesn't have any of his draw mechanic in play. He doesn't have anything that's going to let him, manipulate the cards. He doesn't have a lot of options. So at this point, we're just trying to fix counters. I made some tokens. And basically at this point, we're just trying to... make sure we're keeping everything under control. I've got a little bit of mana floating. I can't remember exactly what at this point I choose to do. But if I'm not mistaken, I'm basically going to use this. Basically use Everflowing Chalice for all of the X mana that I have available. I can't really tell what the number's on, so forgive me for that. But if I believe correctly, it was a pretty high number. It was going to be like for 7 or 8 or something like that. And then, of course, actually, I think it was for 4. And then because of doubling season, it doubles to 8. Basically, and at this point, I'm just going to again, use Venser. I think at that point it was just a matter of first using Diabolic Tutor to search. And at this point, I basically decide, hey, you're going to have one more turn. So you've got one turn to make a big difference. You've got one turn to get that humility off the field. Or I'm going to do it for you, but in the bad way. That's the one problem with my deck. I mean, it has so many outs. It has so many little tricks it can do. There's just an endless number of ways that I can win a game. Naturally, I can just let my big Plainswalkers with their, huge number of effects. The only problem, the only thing I dislike about the deck is, as you can see, I've got 5 planeswalkers. Resolving that many effects, deciding which ones to use and when, how I want them to interact, does get very, very, very time consuming. It becomes very annoying. But you know, there's always a price to pay for a really powerful deck. As you can see, my board states just, I mean, I'm just racking up more and more cards. So basically, I find my card. I basically get Karn, put it in my hand. At this point, I already have my Blow Up the World card. It's just a matter of when I want to play it. I basically get the Karn, make the joke that, hey, we can, we can always restart this game if we want. We don't have to keep playing this game. we can play the Karn game, and we can just keep the gravy train rolling all day. But no, just like I told myself, like, I'm just gonna go ahead and get all the the big hitters. Next I'm gonna somehow tutor, and I'm gonna go get Jace the Mind Sculptor. Then I'm gonna go get this guy, and we're gonna sit here and have some fun. So it's like, I'm gonna let me play Karn. And I think at this point, I'm gonna use Karn to hit his artifact. Or no. Jace is ulted, so now it's just whenever I play a card, I'm just gonna exile something. I use Karn's, or I use Venzer's enter trigger from Karn to exile the artifact. I haven't actually done anything with the Karn yet, but at this point, I think I just choose to hit the Locksturm, if I'm not mistaken, or I choose to do nothing at all. I really can't remember right now. But I go ahead and put Karn's counters, remembering that he does get double counters at this point. Really would have been nice at this point if I had managed to get something in play that was going to let me use my Planeswalkers more than once. Unfortunately, no such luck. But as you can see now, with 6 total Planeswalkers in play, so many options, so many just power cards I can play. Even if I choose not to win this turn, which I don't think I do, I have yet to actually cast my General. And for those wondering, if you can't actually see it up there in the corner, I actually choose to play Sliver Queen. A lot of people ask me why I choose to play Sliver Queen over some of the other 5-color generals, and it's mainly I choose to play Sliver Queen because the deck is so heavy oriented around Planeswalkers. I don't run a whole lot of creatures. It's like 2 or 3 creatures in the entire deck, and I need something that was going to make bodies just for chump blockers for the like the Goblin decks, the Soldier decks. I needed something that was going to give just those little chump blocks. True, unfortunately, it doesn't help much against trample decks. But not a lot of those going around in our group. I don't see a whole lot of those, so I was like, I really wasn't concerned about that. As you can see with me waving my hand around, I do have a board wipe, which I can play at any time. However, I don't want to play it just simply because the Ulamog is vulnerable. At this point, I thought it was funny that I did have the Humility out, and I can't use the board wipe. My hand is insane. Unfortunately, I do not have the Reliquary Tower. I'm going to end up having to discard most of that. But I'm going to go ahead and use... I believe at this point I use the Liliana's Search effect one more time. Just trying to decide what next plays I wanted to make. At this point the game was pretty much locked. Not a whole lot he could do at this point. I knew at this point if he didn't draw any kind of an answer to Humility, it was just going to be basically, swing fest between his Ulamog, trying to force me into blocking it. Which unfortunately I'm not going to fall for. I have no reason to kill the Ulamog. He can ping at my Planeswalkers all day long. It's really not going to make any difference to me. Again, I hope you guys can forgive me. I know this game is running a really long time. Probably try to edit some of this out if needed, but for the most part, basically this whole game was, my friend was trying to decide if he wanted to buy the Eldrazi deck, and I was really just trying to play slow, let him get a good feel for the deck, let him, understand how the deck runs. But, the bad thing is, when you play against a deck like mine, a 5-color Super Friends deck, the really unfortunate thing is my deck doesn't play easy. It doesn't play nice. The deck just wants to kill you, and it does a really good job of that. It makes the game very annoying for anything that's not a planeswalker to do anything at all. So at this point, I remind him he has no triggers. He is a 4/1. Basically, he's just going to sit here and decide who he wants to shoot 4 damage at, gain his 4 life. Again, his life is irrelevant. Especially against the Super Friends deck, I don't care. You can have 10,000 life; it's not going to matter. My deck doesn't win through combat. It doesn't do anything silly like that. Basically, the only way my deck wins is I basically put a lot of planeswalkers in play, and then play any kind of huge wrath effect that destroys everything. At this point, because of my Mycosis Lattice making everything an artifact, if I play anything that destroys all artifacts, it's basically, that's one way I can win. Unfortunately, it would get rid of all of my Planeswalkers at this point because of my Mycosis Lattice. And I am trying to keep that in mind so I don't just make a big misplay myself. But I actually... so at this point, I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to win, because I did play 2 cards I don't normally play together. I did play the Mycosis Lattice and the Humility together, which I don't normally do. Again, this is just a matter of me dropping a bunch of cards, just trying to play the deck slow, just trying to let him get a handle on the deck, how it plays. As you can see, he's already swung with all his cards, plays a couple more, passes a turn. But at this point, at this point, I'm trying to decide, when I want to end the game. There's not much point in going much further if needed. So now I'm just going to go ahead and scry a huge number of cards, which I actually think I forget to do. Or I already did it. I wasn't paying attention. I may have already done it. But as you can see, I play the Karn. And most people at this point realize that there's just no point in doing, there's really no point in doing this, because everything being an artifact, I can basically tap out my mana, destroy all of his lands, and then, then use the board wipe in my hand to kill the Ulamog, and then it can never come back and play. I can basically lock this game down right here and now, and I play the Karn just basically to say, hey, here it is. Even if if you find that answer, I'm gonna, it's gonna hurt you. It's gonna cost you a whole lot if you find that answer. So again, I use Tutor, the Tutor effect of Liliana. Use the Karn's come into play trigger to get rid of another card. I think I actually did miss a couple of triggers, but that's kind of irrelevant at this point. The hard thing for me with this deck is remembering which Planeswalker has already used its ultimate, which Planeswalker emblems I have, which ones I don't. Trying to decide, trying to remember which ones have I used this turn, which ones have I not. It actually can become quite a headache if you're not really paying attention. Now, if you're just kind of going through the motions, it becomes really obvious. So again, I'm just reminding it. Yeah, it's just, yeah. We just agree there's no point. I can just swing everything out. There's just no point at doing that. I reveal 2 board wipes in my hand. I'm like, even if you do, it doesn't help. But again, guys, thanks for watching. I appreciate everything you've done for the channel. If you like the video, if you did like the video, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and if you guys have any suggestions on what you'd like to see for another video, please leave it in the comments section below, and we will try to do a video on that. So until then, guys, thanks for watching, and have a great day.